first, we're going to talk about millennials. Does this statement describe a young person in your life? Quote, millennials are struggling to develop positive, lasting relationships, and these relational difficulties are likely tied to increasing levels of emotional and mental health issues they report experiencing on a regular basis. That's what my colleague George Barna of Arizona Christian University's Director for Research at their Cultural Research Center says about the millennial generation in the new installment of his research study. George is also FRC's Senior Research Fellow for the Center for Biblical Worldview. George, welcome back to the show.
Joseph, always good to be with you.
So glad to have you. I want to remind people that as we talk about millennials, these are people born between 1984 and 2002. What did you find contributes to the struggles that millennials are having developing positive, lasting relationships?
You know, Joseph, there were quite a number of things. Among those were the fact that they are not very trusting of other people. We gave them a whole list of people, asked them how trusting they were of them. There was no type of person, no group of people, no particular individuals of a type in their lives where even a majority said that they had a high level of trust in those people. That includes family, intimate relationships, their closest friends. So they're struggling with that trust issue. Part of it has to do with their own self issues, the fact that they doubt themselves, the fact that they don't really sense that they're making significant progress in life. They don't have a sense of purpose that they're moving toward or real standards that suggest to them that they personally have value. But that also reflects the fact that they don't see people the same way that God does. They don't attribute inherent value to other human beings. And so we found that they are actually much less tolerant of other people. They are not very respectful toward other people. They're the generation that's least likely to believe in the concept of the golden rule, to treat others the same way that they want to be treated. So you look at all of that and the fact that many of them have alternative worldviews that would suggest that either life isn't real, life doesn't have value, life isn't worth living. You put all of these things together, and before you know it, you've got real obstacles to overcome if you want to develop positive and lasting relationships.
There's a lot to dig into there. If they have rejected the golden rule, what have they replaced that with?
Well, it goes back, I think, to their view of God and their view of self. For millennials, they would say that life is all about themselves. There's nobody else who's going to care for them like they care for themselves. Nobody else, based on their own thinking about how they treat others, who is going to really sacrifice to make sure that they're taken care of. And so a lot of it has to do with, you know, people need to treat me well before I'm willing to treat them well. So the golden rule is kind of the reverse. It's like I have an obligation because God loved me first. I need to love other people first. That's the model that he's given to me. My life isn't about me. It's about how I know, love, and serve God. And part of the way that I do that is by taking care of other people, committing to them, sacrificing for their best needs, and then believing that God will take care of me. But millennials see it in just the opposite way. I've got to take care of myself first. And a lot of this comes back to the fact that a majority of them do not believe in a all-powerful, all-knowing, loving, just, merciful God who created them and is still involved in their life today. Most of them would either say that there is no God at all, or they would say that if God exists, he's not involved in my life, life on a day-to-day basis. I have to take care of myself, and if I do enough good enough job of that, he'll bless that.
And of course, that is the exact opposite of the instruction we see in Scripture to love those who persecute you, to treat other people well, despite the fact that they don't treat you well. You also mentioned the trust issues that they seem to have, and it feels like these could be related. Is the fact that they don't trust people due to the fact that people aren't loving them enthusiastically enough, quickly enough?
That's part of it. Just another interesting part of the study found that this is a generation where a majority of them admit to having what is commonly thought of as mental and emotional health issues. And so, for instance, 54% of them told us that they frequently struggle with issues related to anxiety, depression, and fear. And so when your perspective of the world is that it's out to get you, and by the way, their response to that, they are the generation that by far is most likely to say, if somebody does something I don't like or something that may hurt me or discourage me, I'm going to get them back. Well, when you take that mentality into relationships, it doesn't bode well for creating lasting, vibrant, deep relationships. Other people are going to be wary of you, when they believe that you're not out for their best interest, you're out only for your own best interest.
It does make sense that when you are skeptical of everyone, it's hard to form strong emotional bonds with people. And you talk about these trust issues that millennials seem to be experiencing. How different is that than the generations before them?
We looked at probably a dozen and a half different attributes related to relationships and mental health. And what we find is that typically not only are millennials higher on each of these items in terms of not being at normative levels, but what we found is that they, in some cases, are 2 or 3 times more likely to have a particular negative perspective toward other people. Their levels of disrespect for other people much higher. Their levels of willing to get revenge on other people more than twice as high as you would find with older generations. So these are not minimal differences. What we're finding is this is a radical shift in how they think about themselves and other individuals, and how that gets played out in terms of their attempts to develop meaningful relationships.
What would you say is the most surprising thing that you discovered about the way they are, the way the trends are going these days?
Well, to me, the fact that 54% are willing to admit that they regularly struggle with anxiety and depression and fear, that really jumped out at me as being a big deal. And one of the reasons for that is because that's not a socially desirable answer that you want to give in a research survey. It's something that people may admit to, but it's not something that they're going to talk about often. So we appreciate the honesty in the course of the survey. But what that also says to me is that number is probably even much higher than the 54%. It's probably closer to the 2/3 to 3/4 range. I mean, that's typically what you'll find with these kinds of issues that you research, where people are admitting to things that they wouldn't normally bring up in daily conversation. So to me, that's a major issue. The National Institute of Mental Health tracks this on a daily basis. And they not only agree with these kinds of things that we're pointing out in the survey through their research, but they're also finding that with the subsequent generation, one that you're going to talk about later in your program, Gen Z, that these issues may be even bigger for that particular generation. So I know some adults would be saying, well, millennials, they're adults, it's too late. Let's focus on kids. Well, if you focus on these kind of issues, you've kind of got a twofer going here. You're going to get 2 generations for the price of 1, because both of these generations are struggling with these issues.
And I think one of the take-home lessons, perhaps, from this conversation as people all over America prepare to have dinner with their family, many of whom will be millennials, is just the recognition that the odds are that they are experiencing significant mental stress and a sense of isolation and loneliness, and that affects all sorts of things. And just to have that awareness as we deal with people, and kindness, of course, always gets us along much further than aggression with people. But George, what are the opportunities? What are the strengths? How can we build bridges with people who may not be in our generation but are dealing with these millennial struggles?
Yeah, one of the things, Joseph, that the research brings out is that millennials do not want conflict. And so they will avoid developing a relationship with someone if they think that relationship is going to have much conflict involved in it. And so when you engage with these people, the thing isn't to be beating them over the head. If they're not a Christian, and most of them aren't, most of them don't believe in God, most of them don't believe that the Bible contains truth. The important thing is to find places where you can connect with them, different kinds of issues, experiences, common beliefs, and build on those. And as you do that, to recognize that what you want to be doing is asking questions about what they believe and why they believe it, not telling them you're wrong, but simply trying to understand where they're coming from and giving them options to think about without saying, I know the right way, you don't know the right way, but giving them those options to consider. And over the long haul, modeling those behaviors so that they think, yeah, that's something I need to pay attention to.
George Barna, greatly appreciate your research as well as your wisdom. We look forward to next time.
Thanks, Joseph.